If Bruce Lee were around today, would he be known as the greatest martial artist of all time?
I don't think so.
That's right. And as a matter of fact, if Bruce Lee were around today, he wouldn't even be able to achieve the same level of success as the biggest martial arts movie star in the world. If Bruce Lee were alive today, he wouldn't be Bruce Lee. That's what the article said. And if that doesn't make sense to you, they mean that in today's world, it would be impossible for Bruce Lee to reach the same level of achievement that he reached 50 years ago. You know, I get these articles a few times a week that are telling me the truth about Bruce Lee getting humbled on the set of the Green Hornet and how Quentin Tarantino only embellished the story a little bit. I see the articles how Bruce Lee needed Gene Lebell to teach him all about grappling and everything about martial arts that's outside of kung fu. Now, if you've been a fan of this channel for any length of time, well then you know that none of this stuff is true. But if you're new here, hey, you might want to check out the videos that I have on those topics after you finish watching this video. But like I was saying, these articles, I usually do not read them to learn anything about Bruce Lee. I mean, some of them have even cited Beerdy as a reputable Bruce Lee historian on YouTube. And I guess that's the sad state of journalism these days, where people will write up anything and not even bother to check the validity of their information. So I wasn't at all surprised to read this article all about how Bruce Lee's martial arts movie career would be impossible to happen today. I mean, yes, it is true that it would be hard to create another phenomenon like Bruce Lee. It's been 50 years since he passed in 1973, and there hasn't been anything like him. And I think there's a big reason why that this article does not address. And if you bear with me, I'll tell you exactly why there hasn't been another Bruce Lee yet. So, this Screen Rant article, 8 Reasons Bruce Lee's Martial Arts Movie Career Couldn't Happen Today, by Megan Hemingway, is saying that the changes in the movie industry and the culture would not allow Bruce Lee to have the same success that he had 50 years ago. The 8 reasons she gives are as follows. The decline in Western martial arts interests. Megan says the martial arts boom that existed in the 70s is faded, and there's now a limited market for martial arts films, which would make it difficult to achieve the same level of success as Bruce Lee. Dominance of CGI and visual effects. Fight scenes in modern movies rely heavily on CGI and visual effects, which diminishes the relevance of a martial artist's skills, as actors can now look impressive without extensive training. Lack of genre commitment by actors. Unlike Bruce Lee, modern actors strive to diversify their careers and avoid being pigeonholed into a single genre or typecast. This would make it challenging for an actor solely interested in martial arts to succeed. Stricter stunt rules. Modern studios prioritize safety and are less likely to allow actors to perform their own stunts, limiting the creative freedom and boundary-pushing opportunities for martial artists. The rise of MMA. The popularity of mixed martial arts has shifted audiences' preferences toward realistic fights, diminishing the appeal of stylized martial arts movies. Changes in casting process. Casting in Hollywood has become more formalized and requires rigorous auditions, making it less likely for a young martial artist to be discovered in a public setting like Bruce Lee was. Decreased popularity of international dubs. While Bruce Lee gained fame through the international films dubbed in the U.S., the current theater landscape and streaming services make it challenging for foreign martial artists to establish themselves in Hollywood. Remake and sequel dominance. Hollywood's current focus on remakes, sequels, and established franchises limits opportunities for original films like Bruce Lee's martial arts movies. So those are the 8 reasons that Megan gives for why Bruce Lee would not achieve the same level of success today that he had 50 years ago. And there's a problem with everything on Megan's list. Did you guys notice it? See, the problem is that Megan seems to have gotten her history from dragging the Bruce Lee story, or maybe she had ChatGPT write this entire article for her because she doesn't seem to know anything about Bruce Lee. But before I get into some history on Bruce Lee, I have to address a couple of the other points that she made. So she keeps bringing up how martial arts films have declined in popularity, but there are subgenres within the label of martial arts films. Bruce Lee movies were called foot and fist films as opposed to the wuxia movies that Shaw's Brothers Studios was making in the 60s with the flying swordsman. Bruce was a big fan of Japanese samurai films that were coming out of Japan. Foot and fist movies, wuxia movies, and samurai movies are all technically considered martial arts films, but they're not all the same. And I bring that up because these stories can be reinterpreted in other genres, like how Akira Kurosawa's samurai movies continue to be a huge inspiration for Star Wars. And whether you like the new Star Wars movies under Disney or not, it doesn't change the fact that Star Wars movies have made like $4 billion since George Lucas retired and sold Lucasfilm to Disney. Or take an action film that became a franchise. John Wick is about to get a 5th movie and a spin-off television show. Keanu Reeves had to undergo extensive training just to pretend to know what he was doing on screen. And Chad Stahelski and the team at 8711 are behind the John Wick movies and a long list of other action movies. And anyone who knows something about the stunt work in America, they know that 8711 is where a lot of stunt people go to train. Some of what Megan is saying in her list is really an insult to the tremendously skilled people who literally do backbreaking work to pull off the amazing stunts and fight scenes in the blockbuster movies that we have today. See, the thing about Bruce Lee being typecast into a certain role, it shows that Megan has very little understanding of the man and his movies. And I don't blame her because, well, even Bruce Lee fans are in the dark when it comes to all of his movies. And I'm not saying that as an insult to any Bruce Lee fans, but think about it. Like, what comes to mind when you think of a Bruce Lee movie? You think Bruce Lee is the alpha dog who comes to kick everybody in the head, right? I mean, the first Bruce Lee movie that I saw when I knew that I was watching a Bruce Lee movie, it was Way of the Dragon when I was 18. So anyway, my first time watching Way of the Dragon, I wanted to see Bruce Lee fight. I wasn't paying attention to the actual story. I didn't understand that his character was basically a country bumpkin from the New Territories. I completely missed the thing about the New Territories. The movie that I saw was dubbed into English, so some of the jokes didn't translate well. And then there was the cultural stuff that completely went over my head, like how Bruce Lee has to take a dump, but he doesn't know how to use a Western toilet, so he squats on the seat. That was supposed to be funny, but most people missed the joke. Take another one of his movies, Fist of Fury or The Chinese Connection. Bruce plays at least 3 characters in that movie, and some of what he was doing, it was actually a bit of an homage to Jerry Lewis. It was supposed to be funny, but we missed it. Also in that article, Megan talks about how Bruce got discovered while giving an exhibition at a karate tournament, but she doesn't talk about how during Bruce's screen tests, he explains the differences between how characters are portrayed in the Chinese opera. And why is that? Well, because Bruce Lee's father was in the Chinese opera, and Bruce learned more from his parents' friend, Fook Young, while he was living in Seattle because they were living together at Ruby Chow's place. Bruce Lee was a martial artist, and he was also an actor. But at one point in time, Bruce was only an actor who was trying to dabble in martial arts. And I talked about this in my video on how Bruce Lee studied kung fu long before meeting Yip Man and beginning his formal training in Wing Chun. Bruce was hanging out at the set while these old Wong Fei-hung movies were being made when he was a kid. Before Bruce's return to America, he had 20 film credits, and he had his first role as the lead actor in his final film before he moved to the US in 1959. Now, maybe in Hollywood, Bruce ran the risk of being typecast, but we'll never actually know because he didn't live long enough to show us otherwise. But this is what we do know. I mentioned that within the genre of martial arts film, there are these subgenres, and this was actually going to be the case for Bruce. He was in the process of making a historical martial arts film with Shaw's Brothers Studios. He was also going to complete The Game of Death, which was actually going to be a philosophical film where he would showcase the philosophy behind Jeet Kune Do. There was also Southern Fist, Northern Kicks, which was also going to be a narrative-driven film that was also looking to prove Bruce Lee's philosophy on martial arts. As for remakes, Bruce was planning to do an American remake of Way of the Dragon, with the remake set in San Francisco. And of course, Bruce's biggest film, Enter the Dragon, that was really just a remix of a James Bond movie. See, the truth about Bruce Lee's movie career is really this. Bruce Lee didn't even become Bruce Lee in his lifetime. Bruce Lee was the most successful in the final 2 years of his life, and when he became the biggest martial arts movie star in the world, he was already dead. The martial arts movie craze of the 70s, that started after Bruce Lee was already gone. What I almost always see in these discussions on Bruce Lee's stardom is people getting the facts completely out of order. If Bruce had been a huge star in Hollywood, he'd have never gone to Hong Kong in the first place. And unfortunately, a lot of the conditions for why Bruce Lee even had to go to Hong Kong are still in place today. This is the other thing that gets overlooked when talking about Bruce Lee's movie career. Bruce Lee saw the movies as a conduit for spreading his ideas about martial arts. Once Bruce got his message out there, who knows what he would have done? Maybe he would have retired in 1985 with at least $10 million like he said in his chief aim. And see, the truth is that there can be another Bruce Lee, but there are factors in Hollywood preventing this from happening, and it has nothing to do with the reasons that Megan mentioned in her article. Think about a guy like Donnie Yen, who is amazing in pretty much everything he does. How many movies made in Hollywood have had Donnie Yen in a lead role? Star Wars Rogue One made $1 billion, but what kind of numbers could Lucasfilm do if they made a movie about Donnie Yen's Rogue One character being haunted by Darth Vader and an Inquisitor? Donnie Yen was amazing in Triple X. He was amazing in the latest John Wick movie, but Donnie Yen is always a supporting character in Hollywood. We're talking Donnie Yen, son of a legit old school grandmaster. Donnie from Boston. You guys know he grew up in America, right? He had to go to Hong Kong to make it. Over there, he's the highest paid actor in all of China, but in Hollywood, he's a supporting character. Jet Li, one of Jet Li's best performances is in a movie that isn't even about martial arts. He plays a swimming coach who's dying from cancer, and he's trying to teach his autistic son to be independent before he dies. In Hollywood, Jet Li's just a dude who kicks people in the face, and he didn't even get to have a romance with Aaliyah in Romeo Must Die. Jackie Chan was trained in the Chinese opera, so that meant he had to be able to sing and dance on top of learning acrobatics and martial arts. Could you imagine Jackie Chan in a musical made by Hollywood? The biggest reason there will never be another Bruce Lee is because Hollywood executives won't allow it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people out there with the talent and the charisma. I mean, look at a new guy like Louis Tan. Like Bruce Lee, he's mixed. His father's actually a stunt coordinator and runs a martial arts school where he's taught other actors in Hollywood. I don't know what happened to the project, but Louis was actually announced as a leading role in a detective series that sounded very similar to the #1 son role in the Charlie Chan show that Bruce was supposed to play. And as a matter of fact, when the news came out, I commented to Louis that I won't be surprised at all if he one day picks up Bruce Lee's mantle. The point I'm making with Louis is that here we have a guy who seems to be following in Bruce Lee's footsteps, but he doesn't have to be stuck doing strictly martial arts films. And it would be impossible to do what Bruce Lee did in the late 60s and early 70s because the world is different today. But that doesn't mean that someone can't reach the same destination by following a different path. And while I'm talking about this, I'm reminded of something that Michael Jai White said in a DJ Vlad interview about why there aren't big martial arts stars today like there were 30 or 40 years ago. Mike said that back then you could take a guy who was just good at martial arts and just stick him in a movie. People were mystified by all of it and audiences were less demanding. Today, being good at martial arts, that's not enough. You also need to know how to act. That is, unless you have guys in the mob who put you in the movies like Steven Seagal, then you don't have to be able to act or be good at martial arts. But serious question though, how many people are working in the movie industry who are inspired by Bruce Lee? I can think of one guy right now off the top of my head. That's Arnold Chan. He's actually close friends with Michael Jai White. Arnold Chan, on top of being a martial artist, actor, stuntman, and stunt coordinator, is also a striking coach for professional boxers and MMA fighters. He was Tyron Woodley's striking coach when Woodley was the welterweight champion in the UFC. And if that's not being like Bruce Lee, I don't know what is. And see, it's crazy that being like Bruce Lee means you have to become this big legendary iconic figure. People think I'm a Bruce Lee fanatic because I run this YouTube channel, but you know how Bruce Lee really inspired me? I saw this guy who found a way to get paid to basically stay at home and play kung fu all day and work out. And I decided that I wanted to do the same thing, get paid one day to stay home and train. But to really bring this thing home, this article says that changes in the film industry would make it difficult for martial artists to replicate the career success of Bruce Lee in today's movie landscape. And I acknowledge that some of this may be true, but as I said, I believe someone can take a different path to reach the same level of success as Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee was more than his movies. This guy was on the scene when you had guys like Alan Watts and Jiddu Krishnamurti who were gaining popularity with spiritual seekers. Bruce was the guy who made every martial arts person in America pay attention to what he was doing and saying, even if they didn't agree with him. Bruce was also a person who impacted the culture in several areas, not just martial arts. And so it would take a person like that to follow in Bruce's success. And because of the way the world is today, they would have to go about doing it differently. The world has changed a lot over the last 50 years. And I guess this is something to think about. If there is another big martial arts action movie star, would they actually be the next Bruce Lee? Or would they be the first, the first Louis Tan? Like, why is it necessary to measure someone's success against another person's success? Why do we get to decide this person is a complete failure because they didn't reach the legendary status that Bruce Lee didn't even live to see? It's just something to consider. But if you want to hear more about Bruce Lee learning Kung Fu before his formal training with Yip Man, be sure to check out this video. And if you want to hear about why Bruce Lee actually ended up leaving Yip Man's school, be sure to check out this video. But hey, I have to get back to working on getting the bag so I can afford a new training space one day. So while I do that, y'all keep training, remember to breathe, and come back and holler at me on the next video.